Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on our webinar session around the licensing changes for Windows Server and System Center. My name is David Bloxham, the Marketing Manager at SoftwareOne, joined today by Simon Matthews, one of our lead consultants from our Microsoft Advisory Services team. Before I hand over to Simon to take us through today's session, just a few housekeeping rules. As you may have noticed as you join the call, being set on mute, just to ensure that the sound quality remains at an optimum. If you do have any questions throughout the session, we do encourage questions and engagement and interaction. Please use the chat box facility on your panel. Send us your questions and we'll look to answer them at the end of the session. So Simon, I shall hand over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our B Core Ready licensing changes for Windows Server and System Center. Just a little bit about myself before we crack on. The name is Simon Matthews. I've been in and around Microsoft licensing for around about 10 years now. The majority of that time was for Microsoft themselves in the UK, just outside of Reading. So I've seen the changes all the way from 2003 to 08 to 2012, and now we're seeing the changes that are happening with regards to 2016. In terms of agenda, let's get onto my slides. There we go. Agenda-wise, yeah, I think we should always start with a quick recap with regards to the current licensing, have a look at the future licensing, what's coming down the line for everyone, look at the commercial impacts, and then a little sort of a show and tell session with regards to how we approach and how we see managing that transition should be done. So quick recap with regards to the 2012 licensing. It was a change when 2012 came out initially. Microsoft embraced the processor-based model, so they took on a much more sort of power-orientated approach. It kind of made sense at the time. Every license that you bought, you got two processors for that, and every user or device then needed a CAL. There was no real difference between any of the products that Microsoft that were producing here for data center or standard, and the biggest difference was in one thing, and that was virtualization. If you had a highly virtualized environment, it was almost de facto that you should buy data center. If it's a standalone environment or low virtualized, you quite simply bought processor. So it's a very nice and very simple model that people were embracing. So from a physical side of things, what you have to do and what you continue to have to do is license all of the physical processors within your environment, and the big difference being that virtualization. The number of virtualization operating system environments that you've got from a data center perspective is unlimited if you bought data center, whereas from a standard perspective you're always limited to two virtual operating system environments. There was also a 90-day allocation rule. So as you can see in this slide, you've got sort of a standard licensing infrastructure. Your virtual machines can move in and around everywhere, and you have to assign for what we call peak capacity. So in this example, where you've got two virtual machines going across 4 actual boxes, each box would need to be licensed for those 2 virtual instances. And you must assign 2 processors for each server. License mobility from a write perspective is not available for Windows Server. By license mobility, that's the ability to move a license from one machine to another machine and then transfer it back within 90 days. You are free to move it, you're just not free to move it back. and you may not assign your Windows servers on a short-term basis, so you can't quite simply put, you can't assign a license to one box one day and then move it across again. From a System Center perspective, with 2012, Microsoft really started to sort of bring all of the products together. You have a series of capabilities from a management perspective that you want to do, be those security, process automation, backup and recovery, monitoring, and then there would be components of System Center that you would then use to implement those. The popular ones being things like Configuration Manager, Ops Manager, Data Protection Manager, and certainly endpoint protection from an antivirus perspective. In terms of the products, they sit very well together. They were once individual products. They're now very much a group product. They're very much look and feel of controlling it with one single pane of glass. I should also state to everyone that I'm not exactly what you might call a technical person. So if I get anything wrong from a technical perspective, please forgive me, and please just judge me on the licensing side of things. So rather similar to the way that the Windows Server is licensed, System Center mirrors that absolutely identically. You buy into processor lumps. For each license, you can a standard license allows you to manage 2 operating system environments. So with standard Windows Server being 2 virtual, System Center was two instances as well. And then from a data center perspective, you buy for the number of physical processors, and then you can manage an unlimited number of operating system environments, exactly the same as a data center. So what we have here is 2 products very much mirrored together. And from a licensing perspective, the rule of thumb that I certainly always applied was, if you could work out how many Windows Server licenses that you'd need, you would then be able to work out the amount of System Center licenses that you would then need on top. From a licensing perspective, exactly the same then appears. As things get moved across, you then must assign them to each processor. License mobility isn't a right again, and you may reassign your System Center licenses, but not on a short-term basis. Again, you have to license in this scenario for peak capacity. So, onto the new stuff, onto the 2016 licensing. The first thing that you need to sort of to look at when you come to the Windows Server 2016 is that when Microsoft on 2012 put the products together and made them standardized, in 2016 the licensing that Microsoft has put together for this one is somewhat separating again. It's almost as if you've got standard and enterprise features once again, which is a typical Microsoft approach for other products. But so the underlying 2 VMs for standard, that still exists, but you could have these things called Hyper-V containers as well. I'll come on to what containers are in a little bit. You can also have nano servers, and you have an unlimited number of containers available to you, whatever the version that you use. You then have these data center versions which enable high density virtualization and provide much more software defined data center type capabilities. We hear so much about software defined this, software defined that, and this is Microsoft's the beginning of Microsoft's journey towards a much more software defined data center provision. Microsoft breaks the data center side of things into 4 different categories: compute, offering extra stability with virtualization upgrades, Hyper-V with payload clustering, very much a play towards VMware. From a networking side of things, this is where I think Microsoft do see a lot of traction from the networking vendors. They're starting to creep into sort of the Microsoft space somewhat. So what we've really got from a networking perspective is some improvements with regards to software-defined networking. Giving you a networking infrastructure that you can take straight out of Azure into the data center and then back out again with very little contact or interest with regards to where your data is actually held. From a storage perspective, storage spaces came into, I believe, 2012 R2 for the first time, and now that's really been improved in there. You've got quality of services there. You've got some extra bits around the replication side of things, which essentially gives you the ability to take your old NetApp devices, your old EMC devices, take those disks and then reutilize them in a much more modern fashion. So low cost business continuity in DR. And then from a security perspective, a lot of this goes around zero trust from installation, the ability to shield off your VMs, have trusted IDs, hosts, and just-in-time admin. So we've got 4 big areas here, where the data center is going to start becoming more and more important for anybody who's actually running their either on-premise data center, hybrid data center, or looking to sort of Azure, AWS type infrastructure moving forward. So containers, you can't get a slide about containers without showing a container, and I think that's probably a really good image with regards to the way that I personally think about containers. I have absolutely no idea what's going on on the inside of that container that we can see in the top right hand side of the screen. No, you haven't got a clue what's going on in there, but the fact is that's the look and feel that what we've got here is isolated, resource controlled, and portable. Exactly what a container actually is. It could be a car in there, it could be toys in there. Only until you've got the key, you can open it up, you can have a look inside, you can then find this. What this actually does for Microsoft is really enables the hybrid on-premise, off-premise portability that people are looking for. Then from sort of the next version up, we've got the Nano server. Picture on the right hand side, I probably should remove this if I ever want to publish these slides, but essentially that's a Nano card. It's small, and a nano is apparently a unit preference meaning 1/1000th, or 10 to the power of -9. So it's a lot of noughts followed by a 1 in terms of size, and that's what Microsoft are looking for here. It's a small footprint server, optimized for cloud and development work, with fewer patches and updates, better utilization, tighter security because it's a smaller footprint, and faster restarts, again because they're smaller restarts. These are the stats that Microsoft come up with. Not particularly sure how they've actually got these stats before the product's released, but if it's 93, 92 and 80% better with regards to things like reboots and critical bulletins and making the virtual hard drives smaller, I'm sure what we've got here is a server license that you can then you load up your images into, and then have them ultimately a very portable and useful server. So from a licensing perspective, what Microsoft are doing here, and I've got the slide completely and utterly missing, which is a bit embarrassing, is they actually no, it's on it. Apologies, it's in a minute. From a system center perspective, what we're talking here is a very, very similar product, which the improvements that are there in order to support the new operating system, 2016, it's the ability to then support your shielded VMs, your Nano servers. But essentially everything somewhat remains the same. Standard is 2 operating system environments, data center is unlimited, and everything else remains the same. Microsoft have also introduced what we call a hybrid use benefit. So their software assurance customers in order to encourage you to get into effectively what is Azure, they've introduced a benefit which allows you to move your image from software assurance on your premises, and you can then upload it into Azure. You have to do it via the base instances. You can't go into something like SQL as a service and use your base license for the SQL as a service. You buy the base instance, minimum of 16 virtual hosts for each of the server licenses that you then put across, and you can then consume your image in the cloud. For the first time, really enabling a lift and shift of your current virtualized environment out of your data center into Azure. Now, when Microsoft first released the sort of press releases with regards to the hybrid use benefits and that they were going to be doing this, they did state at the time that anybody that is going to be on something like AWS or a rack space type scenario, a further right would be introduced to allow this to happen. This isn't necessarily a removal of the 90-day reallocation rule, and I think we need to be quite certain with regards to what this is and what this isn't. But this does allow any of the software assurance customers, and I'm sure there's quite a few of you guys on board, to take your virtual instances and put those into the cloud, and yes, to test them, see how they're running, and then maybe move forward to a much more Azure orientated future. Microsoft did also state at the time of these press releases that you would need to keep your software assurance on your cows. The hybrid use benefit doesn't state that in the product use rights. Software assurance benefits, if you're looking for license mobility, does state that you do need to have software assurance on cows. But for the hybrid use benefit, it's an entirely different section. It's not, and so it's dubious whether you need to have the software assurance on your client access licenses anyway. But if you've got them and they're part of Core Cow, Enterprise Cow, and you've still got them and you're looking for the renewal, there isn't any reason not to renew. It's just that it's a little bit unclear within the product terms, which is Microsoft's Bible of what to do and how to do it from a licensing perspective. In the product terms, it doesn't particularly state anything one way or the other. I'm assuming for the purposes of this call that you need your client access licenses within software assurance, but it's worth having a look at the product terms and asking Microsoft if you are unsure to sort of pass comment with regards to whether you need that or not. In terms of the change in the metric, Microsoft is now licensing based on the number of physical cores. So they swapped for the number of processors, so you have to buy a minimum of 2 processors, and they've swapped to a number of physical cores on the that need to be licensed. You then, same as always, need to have a license for each user or device with a client access license. So servers from the 2016 onwards are cores, and you still need your cows. So the change is another step to much more towards a power-based model. The real reason for the change is an alignment to give consistency with Azure. The way that transitions are going to occur is that anybody with software assurance at the moment, until your renewal can upgrade to Windows Server 2016 or System Center 2016 at any time, from the point of renewal, point of release for the general release, which I believe is going to be the 1st of July. And then at your software assurance renewal, customers will then receive at least 16 cores for each 2 processor license. There is a star which should appear as soon as I do this, and that is with regards to the big question that everybody's going to be asking themselves. Okay, well, if I'm going to get 16 cores, what happens if I've got a server which has got more than 16 cores in it? How does that work? So what Microsoft are asking you to do is actually renew with regards to the amount of physical cores on your servers. So take each individual server that you've got, and you should license at a minimum each server with 16 cores. If you've got a single processor server with, say, 8 cores, you still need to license that with 16 cores, because that's the equivalent in price to the 2 processor license that you've bought at the moment. If you've got servers above 16 cores, and Microsoft has stated that 85% of you will not be affected by this change, not really too sure where they got those stats from or which country they were looking at when they were doing the analysis, but yeah, let's leave that where it is at the moment. If you've got more than 16 cores, you need to be able to prove at a future date with a time-stamped inventory. So you need to do there is some work that needs to be done on everybody's networks with regards to finding out how many cores your servers rely on. The rules that surround it, and probably the most important slide that we've got here, is that you need to license all of the physical cores in the server. There's a minimum of 8 core licenses required for each processor, and a minimum of 16 core licenses required for each server. So if you've got a 2-proc 4-core server, so you've got 8 cores in total, you need to license with 16. If you've got a quadruple proc 8-core server, you need to license with 32. So what we've got here, and with regards to the sort of the Microsoft slide, it actually stops at 10, the way that Microsoft project this. But I have been doing some investigation, as I'm sure you're all scratching your heads with regards to when was the last time you bought a server with less than 8 cores. And yeah, Intel's, with the E7 version 3s, they're around about 14 cores on average. There's a rather powerful 4-core chip that you can still get, but the majority of them seem to be sort of around sort of the 16, 18 core limit. So if we take a typical server which has got 2 processors and a typical purchase of 12, or a typical processor would say 12 cores in it, what we can see there is that needs a license count of 12. What the graph shows is the actual number of licenses. Licenses are sold in 2-core packs. So I'm going to say that again. So the licenses are sold in 2 cores. You have to buy a minimum of 16. So Microsoft will get in every single circumstance the same amount of money that they've always had, but with your larger estate, your bigger servers, when you start renewing, when you're buying new licenses, you will then have to invest more money. If you've got a dual proc 16-core server, then you will need to buy 16 licenses, which would be effectively an increase of 100% on today's licensing. Now, to bring this to life, what we've done is I've got some real life information from a customer of ours that we did a SQL assessment for. We took their Windows Server data as well as part of that. And what I can, if I swap over to my bit, obviously I'm not going to tell you who this customer is. that would be completely wrong. And so what essentially I did, and I'll make this a lot bigger so everybody can see it properly, is take all of the pertinent information that that somebody would then give us. So taking the things like machine names, obviously I call them physical 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever they might be. I've anonymized the data centers, but looking at operating systems, versions, whether they're physical, whether they're virtual, the number of processors, number of cores. Yeah, so we can go over this information, quite a bit, and then the sort of the most important area that we then look at is effectively becomes this one here. Whether we're applying software assurance, because obviously we're talking about renewing your licenses or buying, or effectively buying new licenses. We would then look at the number of old processor licenses that would apply, and then the number of new processor, the new core-based licenses that would then apply, and then and then sort of draw some little conclusions with regards to some form of ratio. Now, the first thing we always start with is somebody's Microsoft licensing statement. The Microsoft view of the world with regards to what people have got. And what we can see here is that this customer, it's very typical, rather similar to, I'm sure, a lot of you folk on the call, had some Windows Server Enterprise, had some Windows Server Standard, the 2008 R2 that they had 220 of those, but they didn't keep them in software assurance. They've kept some software assurance on 2012, but the majority of their new investment has been within data center, and they've kept those active with software assurance. So what we've got is a very stereotypical customer, and so through a process of allocating licenses, and the approach that we always take is to allocate server licenses, first and foremost, oldest first. So what I was able to do is very quickly, and if I take, say, Server 2003 as an example, I take their 2003 licenses that they've got. I applied old licenses to these. Was software assurance applied to it? No, I just applied the normal stuff to it. So no old prop licenses were applied, no licenses were applied, and gradually then go through all of that. And where I've assigned software assurance, so it's some basic SAN work effectively. I've assigned software assurance to it. I've then decided how many licenses would be applied in the old world, how many core licenses would then be applied in this whole new world, and then draw some conclusions with regards to the number of licenses that the customer then needs. So what we could, what I've done with the prop to core ratio is a very, very simple calculation that actually just says, okay, well, if I double click on it, it should work a bit better. Then you've got the number of new core licenses, divide those by 8 because that's the sort of the core to prop ratio, and then divided it by the number of old licenses. So actually we can then very, very quickly figure out that this customer has got a 142% increase with regards to old world to new world. Now 142% does look a little bit boring, to be brutally honest, so the next step we then say is, and I don't think I can make these too much larger, is actually then apply some data with regards to looking at that data, looking at these servers and saying, okay, well, out of all of the data center servers, and hopefully everybody on the call will be reasonably familiar with Power BI, we can look at the number of data center. There we go. It's finally kicked in. This is the data center licenses they've got. This is effectively the majority of their software assurance. We can see up here that software assurance has been applied to all of these servers. So if I unclick it, where it's green here, that's old licenses with no software assurance applied. These are the modern licenses where software assurance has been applied. We can also look at things like physical estate versus virtualized estate. But most importantly, the big green bit here is all the blank licenses, which is effectively where we've not applied any licenses. It's old software assurance. And then we can see that around about 14 of their servers were unaffected by this change, where it says 1.25 to 2.5. We can then start drilling into these servers and taking each one on a case-by-case basis. Now, taking this view that we can here, we can very quickly identify servers that you can consolidate. We can identify very quickly excess servers that you don't need to be licensing anymore. We've applied licensing rules to allow for an optimized licensing estate, and so there's a whole plethora of work that we can put together for you, our customers, in order to be able to help you visualize and have put some meat on the bones of the conversation that actually says, okay, Microsoft have changed the licensing. This is the way that our renewal looks like. This is the licensing moving forward, and here is some more data around and some visualizations around what our next step should be in order to minimize the impact of it. Because when Microsoft say that 85% of the customers are going to be unaffected by it, I think what they're referring to is the 85% of the customers who don't have software assurance. I'm pretty certain that people who with software assurance are going to have servers which are more than 16 cores. You're going to have virtualized estates which could be optimized, because the cheap methodology of licensing processors and not cores, we saw the impact on it with regards to SQL Server, and it's been huge. This is information that we've clarified with regards to somebody's data, their environment today. Once Moore's law kicks in for a couple of iterations, and you might be a couple of years away from renewal, you will not be able to buy a 16-core server. So no matter what Microsoft is stating, there are some wide impacts here with regards to I think it's somewhat of a fiscal cliff. I hate to sort of state it, it's not as bad as the SQL fiscal cliff that caught a lot of people, but boy is it there, and it's a price increase that Microsoft has had to have done, because it needed to be aligned to Azure. Your licensing on premise, they want you in Azure. You kind of all know that. It's not exactly a secret. But with your licensing in a PROC format, it makes Azure look too expensive. And so if the methodologies of both Azure and on-premise mirror each other, one, they can enable the hybrid use benefit, but two, they then take away any pricing issues that you might have. This pretty much concludes everything that I've got for you today. What we've got here is a program that we can put in place for you. I should state that it is a chargeable program. It is something that I would encourage you to speak to your account manager about. This is a very important next step for anybody who's got a renewal coming up, because you're going to need to know what the future looks like in 3 years. If you renew now on PROC, happy days, but in 3 years' time it's going to look quite scary. If your renewal's coming up in the second half of this year after July, you're going to be renewing into cores, so you need to absolutely know. You need to put the processes in place. You need to have the report that I've shown you here, and we need to be able to timestamp that to some form of data, so you can renew as your current estate is, and not have a risk of Microsoft knocking on the door and saying, okay, prove to me how your estate was 2 years ago, because that's what Microsoft is effectively stating here, is that they're going to give you enough rope for you to hang yourself with on the cause. So it's our job as a licensing partner to ensure that you don't do that, and we give you a soft landing no matter what. So hopefully that's okay. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the panel, and I'll attempt to answer as many as I can. If you've got anything, start tapping away, and we can help cover this off. In terms of what this program of work looks like, we've standardized it, we've made it as simple and quick as possible. It'll take a couple of days worth of effort on your part and a couple of days worth of effort on our part. So it isn't the most expensive thing in the world to do, but making mistakes on your Windows Server licensing at the moment may end up being exceptionally expensive. So I absolutely encourage you to do this.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Simon. So as Simon mentioned, we do have some time now for Q&A if there are any questions. Let me just open up the question box now. Okay, first question, Simon. For true-ups in a current VL agreement, do we still stick with procs?
If yes, for any true-ups that you've got, any commitments that you've got on your current contract, the current contract will always apply. So if you've got it in procs and you've got a true-up coming up, you need to true-up in procs. So any server licenses that you've got in those contracts, they are procs. General release will then happen. You'll come to your renewal and you renew in cores. So it's one way you should just keep in mind the price, and the break-even point is at 16 cores or 8 2-core licenses, and you should be fine.
Thank you, Simon. Second question we've got: is it possible to have a copy of the presentation, please?
We will package it up and we will fire it out to anybody that wishes to have it.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Simon. That is currently the final question we have. So just in case anyone's furiously typing away, just leaves me to thank everyone for joining the call today. Hope that's been informative and valuable use of your time. Thank you, Simon, for taking us through today's session. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with regards to the information taken from today's session, and also a link to the slide deck. If you do have any further questions, as Simon mentioned, please contact your Software One account manager. If you're unsure who that is, when I send out the email, please feel free to get in touch with myself and I'll direct you to the relevant people. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you on future events and webinars. Thank you.